Good morning, friends. Welcome to the 19th weekly lecture of our program Samachar Manthan. So, this week has a lot of important topics, a lot of things which can come in your exam. So, we start with the first topic. The first main issue is sexual harassment at workplace. So, you must have been seeing in newspapers, in news, everywhere we have this Me Too movement going on. Every day you have seen politicians, our MOS, External Affairs, MJ Akbar, resign. A lot of people in media coming out and leveling allegations against journalists. A lot of people from the film fraternity, from the business fraternity, coming out and reporting. So in this issue, we will understand what do we actually mean by sexual harassment at workplace, and what are the provisions that we have in India, and how these provisions could be strengthened. So sexual harassment at workplace, according to Supreme Court, it means five things, five criteria can be called as sexual harassment. First is unwelcome act or behavior. Second is physical contact and advance. Third is a demand or a request for sexual favors. Fourth is sexually colored remark. Fifth is showing pornography. And lastly, unwanted flirting. So this is also important for you people, because those who will join the services, if you do any of these activities, you could be charged under sexual harassment at workplace, and your job could be in danger. So, and it's a myth in India. I mean, most of the people don't know what exactly it means. They believe that it means when you force yourself in on the girl. But it is not, the definition of sexual harassment is not that narrow. It is a very broader definition. Even flirting, unwanted flirting, or sending any explicit MMS or video, that can also be considered as a part of sexual harassment at workplace. According to Ministry of Women and Child, sexual harassment includes, it means display of sexist or offensive pictures, posters, MMS, WhatsApp or emails, intimidation, threat, blackmail around sexual flavors, threat, intimidation or retaliation against an employee who speaks up about these. Then next is serious and repeated offensive remarks, inappropriate questions, and remarks about person's sex life. Next is unwelcome sexual advances, unwelcome social invitations with sexual overtones. So all these things could be considered as sexual harassment. So Supreme Court has a different criteria. Ministry of Women and Child adds few more things on that criteria. So what are the impact of sexual harassment? So impact can be categorized under two headings. One is economic impact, and second is social impact. So when we talk of economic impact, see, in a market economy, it runs on a premise of free and fair competition. But what sexual harassment does is that, first of all, it motivates or it incentivizes the woman not to enter the labor force, because now that in media has been so much maligned, it can have this thing that the parents will not send their daughter in the field of media, in the field of film, because they would feel that the environment would be unsafe. And that is the reason why India has such a low labor, we have such a low share of the women working in the labor force. It is one of the lowest in the world, because the atmosphere, the environment at the workplace in India is not conducive for a woman to work, right? Second economic impact of sexual harassment is that girls who undergo this harassment, there's been a research done that their productivity decreases, they become less efficient, they are more prone to leave their job. As there was one incident, I was reading a newspaper that one very bright journalist, when she entered one news channel, there was systematic harassment from the owner of the channel, and she became so much harassed that she finally left, or she finally quit the career of a journalist. She married and she became a housewife. So it's a loss of potential for India, right? It's a loss of potential for India, that some dynamic, some energetic, some really brilliant female employees, they are forced to quit their job because of this. Thirdly, the companies which have, or on which this allegation has been leveled, they undergo a reputational loss, and which ultimately reduces their economic profit, right? Ultimately, if a brand is maligned on the basis of this, nobody would be, nobody would do business with that firm, right? So ultimately, if a big firms get this kind of loss, it is ultimately negative for the economy. So these are the economic impact of sexual harassment. Now let's look at socio-economic impact. So when we talk of socio-economic impact, first of all, a woman who is harassed, it is more likely that she will be more vulnerable to health diseases, health outcomes. She might have a depression problem, she might have other problems, BP and all, and that would reduce her productivity, and that would also increase the cost of healthcare in India, because ultimately when somebody is sick, she will have to visit a doctor, a psychiatrist, and that increases the cost of healthcare in India. And when you spend more on healthcare, you have less money left for spending on other productive activities. Next is, there is also a caste angle in that. So most people, or most women who are vulnerable, they belong to lower caste. I don't know whether you must be aware, or whether this happens in your state, but at least in the Bimaru states, it is very, very common for a Dalit woman to be harassed, to be raped, to be eve-teased when she goes to work by the people of higher caste, and they do it with proud. They have nothing to fear, because they know that they will not report the case, and it makes their condition worse. So there is the angle of gender and caste in it, because the most people, or the most women who are vulnerable to this harassment, are people belonging to lower caste, or girls who are working in unorganized sector. To be really honest, the kind of sexual harassment in unorganized sector is much more than in organized sector, in the media, in film industry, because at least the women in these areas are educated, they are aware of their rights, right? They are more liberated women. But when you talk of unorganized sector, when you talk of villages, when you talk of small towns, the condition is really bad, and nobody actually report. Have you seen any of these women coming out with Me Too? Because they are unaware. They're unaware, and they have so much economic problem that they know that if they will come out, they will lose their job, right? So ultimately, sexual harassment at workplace affects more the girls belonging to lower caste and the lower class. Now let's look at the laws that we have in India. So for first 50 years, we did not had any law. The first law that we had was Vishakha guidelines. And this was actually given by the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court ordered that it is a duty of every organization or every institution that he should or they should ensure prohibition, prevention, and redress. The Supreme Court also directed that there should be a complaint committee which should be established in all the organizations and institutions. Based on the Vishakha verdict, the government came out with Sexual Harassment Act, or the name of the act was Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013. And that act has it broadened the definition of sexual harassment. It was broad in its objective than the Vishakha judgment. So what were the key features of the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act? Firstly, it said that every employer who has more than 10 workers they will have to establish an internal complaint committee, and that ICC would be headed by a woman employee. The ICC, so the procedure under this act is something like this. So if I as a woman have somebody or my boss or somebody has done some kind of harassment to me, what I will do is that I will complain to this internal complaint committee. I can do it on writing, and if I have a fear that if I will do in writing, everybody will know about me and they will kind of penalize me, then I can even tell them in private that I have faced this thing and please do something. So what ICC would do, ICC would have two options. First option ICC would have would to send my complaint to the police, and because this violates what you call as violates section 509. So 509 says word, gesture or act intended to insult the modesty of women that is punished under the law for 1 year. So either the ICC reports my case to the police, or second thing ICC could do is ICC could do an internal inquiry, and it has to complete the inquiry within 90 days. And in those 90 days, the woman could be, or the woman who has been harassed, she could be transferred by the committee, she could be sent on a leave, she could be anything which she's okay with, the ICC will do, right? And also there is a provision that you can only report the case within 3 months. So if suppose it's October, if I had harassment in July, I can only report till October. But in this act gives discretion to ICC on case-to-case basis. So in some cases, if ICC inquires and feels that because of certain circumstances, the woman was silent till now, so in that case this 3-month deadline could be, or an exemption could be given to a 3-month deadline. Also, it includes not just the employee, the working employee, but also the past employee can also file a complaint, right? And if an employee is dead, even her legal heir, he or she can file complaint on her behalf also. So these are the provisions which have been given under the law. So after the inquiry is done, and if a person is found guilty, then the ICC can take two action. Firstly, it can say that salary will be deducted, or it can take three things. It can do three things. Salary will be deducted from harasser. The amount will be decided by the ICC. Second thing it can do is it can terminate him. And third thing it can do is it can go for conciliation, which means both the parties sit together. If that guy apologizes, feels very sorry for his mistake, then this opportunity could also be utilized. But in conciliation, no monetary compensation would be given. So it would not be like that, okay, I did harassment to you, but take 5 lakhs and keep your mouth shut. No monetary compensation will take place in conciliation. So these are the provisions of this act. There is also a provision for preventing misuse. So ICC can inquire, and based on inquiry, if it finds that the complaint is frivolous, then it can give same punishment to the woman employee. But there is safeguard in that if ICC inquires and found that even though it cannot be proved, but we don't think that it is frivolous, because the woman could not prove her case, it does not mean that it's frivolous, right? So in that case, neither the harasser would be punished, nor the woman who has leveled the charge of harassment, she would be punished. So let's look at the issues with the act. First and most important issue is that unorganized sector is not covered under it. And as you know, that majority of women works in unorganized sector. In India at least, we have very few women working in white collar jobs. And as I have told before, the maximum harassment takes place in the unorganized sector. Next is that even the act doesn't cover the members of armed forces and agriculture workers. Now this is also a problem, because agriculture, as you know, employs maximum women, and armed forces, because of low sex ratio, is a very it's very vulnerable organization for sexual harassment. Thirdly, the penalty against the harasser is very, very liberal. So he can either be fined or he can be terminated. That is all. And once he is terminated, he goes to a new job, and we don't have any data in India which have this kind of which have a database which tells, okay, these are the people, these are the employees who have been involved in sexual harassment. And when you go to a new firm, the after checking your character and all, the new firm also searches on the data bank that, okay, this employee has been terminated from the last firm because of sexual harassment case. Then he will not employ him. But right now we don't have any such provision. So anyone who is terminated, he can always find a new job without being shamed if he is capable. And fourthly, it's been 4 or 5 years since the act has been passed, but only 36% or 36% of, according to the 50 report, 36% of institutions have not established the ICC. So what is the way forward? So way forward is that, first of all, the process of making sexual harassment should be complied. And this could only be done when you have when the institutions which have not established ICC, or if ICC has not been able to finish the investigation process within 90 days, they should be penalized. Their licenses should be cancelled by the government. The government will have to establish this fear. Otherwise, no firm would suo moto establish the ICC. Right? It's a time-taking task. So therefore, we need a strict compliance of the law that can only be done when the state or when the government will start penalizing those firms which has not established the ICC. Also, there should be a security audit. So just like economic audit, we need to have a security audit, because and the security audit would see that whether the firm is being or whether they are compiling with the act or not. If they are not compiling, then their act or their license should be cancelled. Also, when a firm or when an employee joins the office, when she gets her orientation program, when she or he gets the orientation program, the firm should also tell us or inform her about the sexual harassment cell in the firm. Also tell them that what do we mean by sexual harassment, and if any of you face this kind of problem in this firm, you can report to that person. So the new employee should be given briefing when he or she joins any institution, because ultimately most of the people are unaware of what exactly sexual harassment means. So there could be some men who believe that flirting is just because I am more of a Casanova, I do flirting. But if he will have to, if he will know that what I am doing, it can cost my job. In that case, he would be better prepared. He would be better aware that he should not cross the line, right? So awareness campaign is required. Of the day, which is sexual harassment at workplace. Let's move to a second issue, which is strategic policy group. Reconstituted. So you must have read it in the newspaper that Ajit Doval has become the most powerful bureaucrat of last 20 years, and now no bureaucrat is near to him in terms of power. So let us first understand how India's national security structure works. What is the India's national security structure? This is actually important for your GS paper 3, internal security. So India's national security structure has four main institutions: the National Security Council, the recently appointed SPG or Strategic Policy Group, the National Security Advisory Board, and the DPC or the Defense, I think, Program Committee, something like that. So the NSG is the National Security Council. It is the prime, or it is the prime advisory body on national security issues to the PMO. So PMO gets all his advice related to national security from the National Security Council, and National Security Council is headed by the National Security Advisor, which in this case is Ajit Doval. Right, so job of NSCE is to advise the PMO on the conduct, on the formulation of national security strategy, or it advises the PMO on all the national security matters. SPG, I will come later. Then we have this National Security Advisory Board. So in this, the people who have been experts of defense, foreign affairs, army, air force, internal security, these people are the members of the National Security Advisory Board. And so it includes people who are retired, who are outside the government. And the job of National Security Advisory Board is to, it provides a long-term prognosis and analysis to the NSC. It actually also plays an important role in formulating the long-term security analysis of India. So it does a long-term security review of India, that these are the problems, these are the threats we will be facing in the coming years, and how we should respond, because it contains expert retired officials who have given 40 years, 50 years in the government. They are experts in their field, and because they are retired, the government cannot just dump them, because we need them for their advice or for the experience. Therefore, they give inputs to the National Security Council about the long-term security view about the country. Then we have DPC, which is constituted in April 2018, and the DPC it is headed by the National Security Advisor, again Ajit Doval, and it has 3 chiefs of Army, Air Force and Navy. It also has Foreign Secretary, Finance Secretary, Defense Secretary, etc., and Home Secretary. And the job of DPC is to prepare draft report on national security strategy, internal defense engagement strategy. It also draws up plans to build a defense manufacturing ecosystem and how we can boost the defense exports in India. So defense related stuff and national security related stuff and long-term national security related stuff, the DPC does that. It is also a new body created recently in April 2018. Now let's come to the SPG, or the Strategic Policy Group. So this group was the brainchild of Brijesh Mishra, who was called as Bharat Sarkar by some of the experts, because during the Vajpayee era, he was the one who runs the government for him. He was an ex-IFS officer, and he was very, very powerful. So SPG, Strategic Policy Group, it is actually a advisory organization for NSC. So just like NSC is advisory a body for PMO, SPG will play the same role for the National Security Council. It will advise the National Security Council that these are the steps we can take, these are the long term problems we have, this is the strategy we should it will also, and the job of SPG will also be to coordinate among the ministries, because problem is that every ministry have their own definition of what constitutes national security. So therefore SPC job is will have to have meetings of different secretaries of ministries, and also of the Army, Air Force and Navy chief, and to bring out consensus that this is exactly what national security doctrine we should have. This is what national security means, and these are the threats we have. Based on the inputs we get from the meeting, it will advise the NSC, and NSC will then advise the PMO. So SPG was constituted in 1998, but it hardly met. It was more of a defunctional organization, because SPG was headed by cabinet secretary. So it was a dysfunctional kind of organization which had almost become dormant. Why this was in news was because recently the government has reconstituted SPG, and now SPG would not be headed by cabinet secretary, but it would be again headed by a national security advisor. So national security advisor now heads National Security Council, the DPC, and also the SPG. All three main institutions of national security, one single person will head, that would be Ajit Doval. Cabinet secretary, on the other hand, would be its job would be to implement the decisions, coordinate and implement the decisions taken by the SPG. So it will become more like a clerk, right? So let us now closely look at the functioning of the strategic policy group. So SPG will assess the National Security Council, and it will take a long-term strategic review of country's security affair. And its membership has been widened, so it includes not just the three army chiefs, it includes three army chiefs, the vice president of the vice chairman of the Niti Aayog, the RBI governor, the secretary defense, secretary external affairs, secretary foreign, secretary atomic energy, the scientific advisor to the prime minister, the secretary DRDO. All of them would be part of the raw chief, the IV chief, all of them would be the part of strategic policy group. So its membership has been diversified, right? So let us now look at the significance and the concerns or the criticisms associated with strategic policy group. So see, the problem which was taking place right now was that there was no consensus on what national security exactly meant. Ministry of Finance has a different issue, Ministry of Environment has a different issue, Ministry of Defense has a different issue, Ministry of Foreign Affairs has a different issue. They have a different, definition of national security. Now, since the SPG would be headed by NSA, who is a key man of the Prime Minister. So now we will have one specific department which will handle the national security of India. Now it will be Ajit Doval who would define, this group SPG would define what do we mean by national security, and once national security has been defined, all the other ministries will have to implement the decisions. So now we have one channel, because the problem that happened was that there was lack of coordination issues among the ministries in the earlier SPG that was constituted. Everybody had their own opinion, right? And the other problem is that the other reason why the past SPGs had failed was because of this SPG will solve the protocol issue. Because earlier it was the cabinet secretary who used to head the SPG. Now the Army, Air Force and Navy chiefs felt that you are not our boss. You are also of secretary rank, we are also of secretary rank, so we will not listen to, or you cannot dictate terms to us, right? So there was this turf war going on. Every secretary believed that we are not inferior to anybody else. Now that has been solved because NSA has a status of Minister of State, and in India Minister of State is above the Minister of or above the secretaries. So now the protocol issue is solved. If NSA heads the meeting, it means that he is the boss, and everybody who is in the meeting is inferior to him. So they will listen to him. They will listen to the SPG, and that will make the coordination process easier. And lastly, it takes a very multi-dimensional, the recent reconstitution of board, it takes a multi-dimensional view on national security. So not just people from defense field, but from science and tech field, from economic field, we have expenditure secretary, we have RBI governor, we have the Niti Aayog vice chairman. All of them have been included in the SPG because the new definition says the national security does not just affect the defense. Even if somebody economically, there could be economic terrorism also, there could be fake currency problem also. So now the national security thing has taken a varied approach. Now it also means environmental security. So that is why this new board will take a holistic view on what exactly are the national security problems that we are facing and how to solve those problems. Let's now look at the criticism of the move. So mostly the criticism which I found was in Hindu, Happy Man. So Happy Moon Jacob you should read if you have time, because ultimately Happy Moon Jacob provides you the other side of the argument on national security and IR related issues. So he usually writes critical articles, and you should know both sides of the argument in order to write a good answer. So when we talk of criticism, first criticism is that it will lead to greater centralization. So now Ajit Doval is head of three, as I've told, three of the four institutions which run India's national security. He has, and plus he has also been given job of managing relations with China, with Southeast Asia. So he is a very busy man. You have given him the job of SPG also. Where does he have time for that? And because he does not have time for that, the experts are saying it would mean that the meeting would not be very often, and he will not have time to micromanage the decisions taken in the meeting, that whether they are being implemented on the ground or not, right? Because he is such a busy man, he has to handle so many other things. Abhi kya tha, the cabinet secretary does not have much job to do. Therefore, cabinet secretary, he used to take this job seriously. But now NSA will not take his job seriously because he has so many other important things to do. So this will lead to suboptimal outcomes, and it will lead to lack of monitoring of the decisions taken by the SPG. Next is what he says, Happyman Jacob says, that we need a national vision on security. So he says that instead of creating more bureaucratic institutions, you have created one more bureaucratic institution. What we exactly need is, we need a national security policy. A policy which is clear cut, which is demarcated, so that each and every institution knows that this is what we have to follow in terms of external aggression. This is we have to follow in terms of internal aggression. If this happens, we will do this. If our plane is hijacked, we will do this. If a terrorist has taken hostage of these people, we will do this. Clear-cut national security council we have, like Israel has, like some other countries, like even China has, US has this kind of policy. So he said, instead of creating these defense institutions, bureaucratic institutions, the government should focus on creating a national security policy in India. And based on that national security policy, all the different institutions can make their own policies, and they can and they can make their own doctrines which they can operationalize during the time of crisis. So without this, he says that ad hocism will continue, and Doval came, when then next person will came, each will have their own personal preferences, and the whole structure will be ad hoc based. Thirdly, there is criticism that NSA is not a constitutional post, neither it's a statutory post. So the constitutional post is cabinet secretary. NSA is not mentioned in the constitution. It's not mentioned by it. There is no act passed. It is an executive post, and you are giving so much unlimited power to a person who is neither elected, who has no mention in constitution. This, he says that it does not go well with the parliamentary democracy, which requires accountability, because NSA does not have accountability to anyone, neither the parliament, neither he just has the accountability to prime minister. So this is against the democratic spirits. And lastly, the government, he says the government should focus on creating chief of the defense staff. Chief of defense staff is a 4-star or a 5-star general who would be head of the defense services. So right now we have general, we have air chief marshal, and we have the admiral, but all of them are 3-star generals. But a 5-star general would be someone who would be at the top of them, and he would manage the coordination among all the 3 forces, right? China has that, Pakistan has that. We also require that for better coordination, because right now the army, air force and navy are working in silos. There's hardly any coordination among Army, Air Force, and Navy. They all have their own doctrines, and they hardly meet with each other. So there's a coordination problem. We need, when there is a war, both Army, Air Force, and Navy will have to support each other. And for that, we need a better coordination mechanism. And for that, we need a post of Chief of Defense Staff. So this ends the second topic of the week, which is Strategic Policy Group. Let's move to the next topic, which is Cold War in the Middle East and what should India do? So this was the news because of Saudi Arabia and Iran fighting each other. And recently Raj Mohan wrote an article in Indian Express. So let's draw a map of Middle East first. It's just a rough map, so don't take it literally. So this is the map, not so correct map of the Middle East. So what do we mean by Middle East? What do we mean by Arab? And what do we mean by West Asia? Let's first understand the differences between them, because that could be asked in the prelims paper. So when we talk of Arab means the region where the people speak Arabic, where they speak the Arabic language. That part of the word is called as Arab. So it includes countries of the Gulf and also the countries of Africa: Egypt, Morocco, Libya, Sudan, Mauritania, Tunisia. All of them are part, Algeria, all of them are part of the Arab world because all of them speak the Arabic language. Second term is the term West Asia. West Asia means includes, it starts from Iran and it only includes the Asian part. It does not include the African part, because the term is West Asia. It includes Iran, it includes all the countries of the Arab in Asia, and it also includes Iran and Israel. So Israel and Iran are also included in the West Asia. Now, a lot of people feel that the Iranians are Arabs. They are not Arabs because they speak Persian language. Their culture is very different from the Arabic culture. So Iran is part of West Asia, but Iran is not part of the Arab world. Now, when we talk of Cold War in the Middle East, the genesis of the problem did not start today. It has been going on since 1400 years, and it has worsened in last 39 years since the 79 Islamic Revolution in Iran. So let's start with the story after the death of Prophet. So when Prophet Muhammad died, there was a fight between two groups in Islam. One believed that Abu Bakr, who was Prophet's companion, with his most trusted companion, he should become the next caliph, right? And the other group believed that the Ali, who is the nephew of Prophet, he should be named as a caliph. Therefore, after the death of Prophet, the Muslims divided into two groups: those who supported Abu Bakr as the caliph, those who wanted Abu Bakr to become the caliph, they became the Sunnis, and those who wanted Ali to become the caliph, they became Shias. So after the group got separated, they started hostility towards each other. They have been fighting mostly in last 1300 years, because Sunnis believe that Shias are not real Muslims. They are the orthodox Sunni beliefs, not the normal Sunni. And the Shias believe that we are the true kind of people who follow the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. Now the problem in West Asia is that Iran is a Sunni, it's a Shia power. It's the leader of the Shias of the world, and Saudi Arabia considers itself as the leader of the Sunni people in the world. And when you talk of the Arab world or the West Asia, Iran has a Shia population of 90%. Iraq has 60% Shias. Syria has 15% Shias, but the ruling elite in Syria, the Assad is a Shia. In Lebanon, you have around 30% Shias, which is a big number, and Shias have a big role in the government. And in the Yemen, Shia has got a decent population. Then there is a country here, UAE is here, and there is Bahrain, which is there. Bahrain has a Sunni monarchy, but its majority of population is Shia, right? Then you have the Gulf monarchies of UAE, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait. All of them are Sunni monarchies. So all these Gulf monarchies, they are afraid of Iran. So what happened was that till 1970s, both Iran and Saudi Arabia were allies of the British. In Iran, you had Shah Reza Pahlavi, who was the Shah of Iran, who was the king of Iran. And Shah Reza Pahlavi started the process of modernization, of secularism in Iran. He wanted to become the Mustafa Kemal Pasha of Iran, and he was a very, very close ally of the US. But the problem with Shah's regime was that it was very corrupt. It was elite. Only the few people kind of benefited from that. So the leftists and the Islamists, all of them were against the Shah Reza Pahlavi, and both of them joined hands, and the Shah's regime was toppled in 79, and Islamic revolution happened in Iran. And after the Islamic revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini came to power, or he was a kind of cleric. Ayatollah Khomeini came to power in Iran. And Ayatollah Khomeini, when he came, he announced that this Islamic revolution will not be confined just to Iran. It will be spread over all of West Asia. It will spread over all of the Arab world. Now, this naturally concerned the Sunni monarchies of the West Asia. They became very, very concerned. They became very, very suspicious of the Iranian intention. And therefore, they started supporting Iraq. Iraq, as you know, had 60% Shia population, but it was being ruled by a Sunni, Saddam Hussein. So therefore, Saddam Hussein, they give arms to Saddam Hussein, not just the Saudis and the Gulf monarchies, but also the US. US gave all kinds of support to Saddam because they considered that Iraq is a bulwark against the expansionist design of Iran. And in 1980, Iran and Iraq went to a 9-year war. And in the 9-year war, Iraq was supported by the Gulf monarchies and the US. Things were under control till 2003, till Saddam Hussein was in power, because Saddam was kind of, keeping a check on the intentions of the Iran. But 2003, Saddam got defeated. When Saddam got defeated, the new regime which came in Iraq was a Shia regime. And naturally, being a Shia, they were very much close to the Iranian regime. So this increased the suspicion of Saudi Arabia and other Gulf monarchies towards Iran. So therefore, and also in 2005 and 6, when Iran said that we are very close to building a nuclear weapon, it even alarmed Saudi Arabia more, because Saudi Arabia had no nuclear bombs, and they felt that if Iran would acquire nuclear bomb, they would, it would make us unsafe, it would make us weaker in terms of, in comparison to Iran. Then let's fast forward to 2011. In 2011, Arab Spring happened. Arab Spring meant that in most of the Arab countries, the young men, the youth, they started protesting against the government, and many of these dictators had to resign or they got killed. So we had Gaddafi, who was killed in Libya. We had Egypt, Hosni Mubarak resigned. In Tunisia, from which this Arab Spring started, the president has to run away. In Yemen, the Saleh government, he had to resign. And also in Bahrain, there was this thing there was Syria. There was Syria also, protests started against Assad. In Bahrain, it started against the Sunni monarchy. So after the Arab Spring, the proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia started. So if those who have studied history, they must be aware with the fact that in Cold War, there was never a direct conflict between US and the Russia. It was always an indirect conflict where both of them were supporting proxies in the other countries, right? Same is happening in West Asia, in the Middle East, since last 7-8 years, where in Syria, Iran is supporting Assad because Assad is a Shia, right? So they want that he should remain in power, so that Syria remains the ally of Iran, while Saudi Arabia is supporting the Wahhabi, the Salafi group who is fighting against Syria, all these Islamists. Then in Bahrain, Iran is supporting the opposition group who are mostly Shias, but Saudi Arabia is supporting the Sunni monarchy. Then let's come to Lebanon. In Lebanon, there is an organization called as Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a Shia militia. It has two wings. One is political wing, one is the militia wing. Iran is a great supporter of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah has a very dominant role in the politics of Lebanon. So in this also, in Lebanon, the Saudis are supporting the anti-Hezbollah groups and Iran is supporting Hezbollah. Now let's come to Yemen. In Yemen, the last year, the Houthis, they kind of rebelled against the ruling regime, and Houthis are Shias, and they captured a large part of Yemen. They even forced the president to run away. So Saudi Arabia interfered in Yemen, and it has bombarded the Houthi areas, and it has alleged that Iran is supporting, it is supplying arms to the Houthis to fight against the ruling elite in Yemen. Also, now recently Saudi Arabia US and Israel, they have got into a secret pact where, because all of them, for all of these three states, the common enemy is Iran. So all of them wanted Iran to be isolated at any cost. And recently, Trump showing hard policy against Iran. Recently, the nuclear deal which US signed with Iran, it has also been cancelled. The Saudi Arabia is very happy because of that. Saudi Arabia now wants that it should function, or it should unite the Gulf monarchies more in order to isolate Iran even further. Saudi Arabia is in talks with India that India should stop dealing with Iran. Now the problem with India is, what should India do? This is the main concern. Should India interfere in the Cold War, in this Middle East Cold War? Should India take sides, or should India just wait and watch? Some people are saying that India should act as a mediator because it has good relations with Saudi Arabia and Iran both. But I don't think that both of the countries will be agreeing for that. So the most pragmatic policy, see, India needs Iran for Chabahar. India needs Iran for oil and gas. It needs Iran for reaching Central Asia. It needs Iran for reaching Afghanistan, for bypassing Pakistan. So Iran is very important for India. Gulf is also very important for India because we need Saudi Arabia and the Gulf monarchies for our oil reserves. We need them for 6-7 million Indians who are working in Gulf. In Iran, there are hardly any Indians working, but in Gulf, a lot of Indians are working. We need the remittances, we need the energy, we need the investment. Now that oil has started booming again, these countries have extra money to invest in the flagship programs like Make in India, Skill India, etc. So we need these. We need both of the regions. So therefore, the experts are saying that we should, focus more on Israel. We should focus more on Israel, and we should keep a equidistance from this conflict. We should neither take side of Iran, neither we should take side of Saudi Arabia, right? Because problem is that, see, because of this conflict, oil price is going on, and oil crisis going on, it is affecting India's economic growth. It is weakening rupees. So this area, this conflict is very much of important to India. And that is why this is an important topic for your mains exam. So this ends the third issue, which is India, which is Cold War in the Middle East. Now let's look at the next issue, which is draft proposed amendment to Electricity Act 2003. So the government is thinking that they will do a draft proposed amendment to the Electricity Act 2003, and let's discuss the key features and the significance together of the draft amendment. So firstly, it talks of DBT in power sector, which means that right now we have some kind of states like Delhi are subsidizing electricity for the consumers, giving them at a very, very cheap price. And what it does is that it is charging extra double the price from the industries, which is hurting their growth. So now government is trying to do is, government is has thinking of bringing direct benefit transfer in power sector, which means that the power tariff would be increased, and those who belong to the poor background, to the poor families, they would be in their account, government will transfer the subsidy amount, right? So they will have to pay the market price of the power tariff, and the difference between the market price and the subsidized price, the difference, the government will give them in cash in their, or it will transfer in their bank accounts. Now this is very nice, because as you know that because of cheap power, because of cheap pricing, the discoms in most of the states are in debts. They are almost on the verge of bankruptcy, because most of the states have this populist idea that we will give you free electricity, cheap electricity, and because of this, the discoms are not getting enough revenue, and because of not getting enough revenue, they are in such a bad situation. So this will ensure that the power sector or these discoms will get enough revenue, and government will take care of those who are in need. Next key feature of this is that it will make discom accountable. So it will it has a provision that if the cost of the discom is increased because of the inefficiency on their part or misgovernance on their part, this cannot be passed in the form of higher tariff to be charged from the consumers. They will have to bear the cost of inefficiency. And if the discom pass that charge to the consumer, government will take strict action against them. So this step will make the discoms accountable. They will feel that if they will do any inefficiency, they cannot charge higher price from the consumer, and they will have to bear the burden of this inefficiency. Third is there will be separation of content and carrier charge. So अभी क्या है? अभी it is the organization or the institution which install these wires and the infrastructure for power supply. So जो लोग खंबे लगाते हैं वो and the company which supplies the electricity to you, they both are same. Right. So government has proposed that those who will build the infrastructure, the power infrastructure, who will install these plants and everything, they would be different, and those who would supply the electricity to the consumer, they would be different. So government has proposed that in terms of supply of electricity, there would be multiple suppliers in one area. And the idea behind that is that it would increase competition among the suppliers, and the ultimate beneficiary would be the consumers, because consumers will get the electricity at a cheaper price. Because if there are 4 or 5 private sector companies competing for supplying the electricity at lower cost, ultimately it will be the consumer who will be the beneficiary of that. Next is, it also talks of renewable energy. So it says that those firms, or it says that repurchase or renewable purchase obligation would be made mandatory, and those firms who are those discoms who are not buying electricity, they would be penalized. A penalty would be imposed on that. Renewable purchase obligation means that if electricity is produced in from renewable sector, state discom will have to purchase some proportion of electricity from those renewable energy companies. It also says that there will be one member from the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy in the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. Next is it talks of smart meters. It says that smart meters would be made mandatory. Smart meters are those which are installed in your home, which automatically tells you this is the amount of unit you have consumed every day, right? So this is actually it is more transparent. It reduces the bill and it reduces any misgivings. And lastly, there will be 24/7 power supply obligation. Which means that the DISCOM will have to take this mandatory that we will provide 24/7 electricity to the household. If it could not provide, it will have to pay penalty to the government, and if it does it in a long term, his license will be cancelled by the government. So ultimately, he will have to ensure that 24/7 electricity would be provided to the consumer. So let's now look at the concerns associated with this proposal. So our People's Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal, who is the kingpin of populism in India, he has kind of criticized this move. Even the staff of the power producing units, they have also criticized it. So one criticism of this is that it will create pockets of competition for wealthy consumers in a sea of monopoly inhabited by the poorest. So in simple terms, it will increase inequality. Which means that it will, in areas where the wealthy people live, where they'll know that people have a very high paying capacity, there will be 4, 5, 6 private sector suppliers who will be who will be taking a bid against each other. But in those areas where the demand of electricity is low, where the poor people live, where they don't consume enough electricity, no private player will show interest. So it will be left to the state government or the state-owned enterprise or the state-owned company to provide or to supply electricity in those areas. So ultimately, it will create inequality in India, where you will have perfect competition in area where the wealthy people live, and you have the inefficient state-owned company who would supply electricity in the poor areas. And the other concern is that it could increase the tariff price. So only the poor people will be subsidized by they will be DBT against them. What will happen to the middle class? The middle class will have to pay the increased tariffs, right? So that will worsen their condition. So this ends this topic. Now let us move to the next topic, which is the Swachh Bharat Mission stats. So recently, the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation came out with the progress of Swachh Bharat Mission in last 4 years. And it is important because you can quote these stats in your answers if a question comes on Swachh Bharat Mission. To be really honest, this is the only initiative of this government which has actually worked on ground. I mean, Skill India, Make in India, all have remained more on paper. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan has been a successful program, and there is no doubt about that. So, Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation has released a report of progress, and it is covered under 6 headings. So, first is that there are more toilets that are being built. So in 2014, 39% of rural households have toilets. Now it is 95%. Next is 8.7 crore toilets have been built under the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. and around 529 districts and 5 lakh 9,000 villages have become open defecation free. Let's move to the next thing, which is increase in toilet uses. So 93 point, according to the National Annual Rural Sanitation Survey conducted by the World Bank, 93.4% of households which have toilets actually use the toilet. Next is there has been increase in funding under the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. And in 2019, 1 lakh crore of total investment will be done on sanitation. Fourth is behavior change, more focus on behavior change and communication. So Swachh Bharat Abhiyan has schemes like Darwaza Band. It has also created volunteers known as Swachhagrahis, just like Satyagrahis. We have Swachhagrahis, and they are volunteers working at grassroots level in the villages who travel to house in increasing awareness among the people about the benefits of having toilets and the disadvantages of doing of open defecation. Then you have next is increase in water supply for the ODF. So under the National Rural Drinking Water Program, more focus has been given to those villages which have become open defecation free, and around 5 lakh open defecation free villages are being provided with piped water supply. And lastly, it is the improvement in health outcomes. So, according to the WHO report, around 3 lakh people have been saved by 2019 because of implementation of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan scheme. It is because of creation of toilets, there is less prevalence of diarrhea, which is a major cause of infant mortality rate in India. And also, it has, according to Bill Gates and Melinda Foundation study, there has been a significant improvement in the lack of stunting and the health in those villages, in the children of those villages which have become open defecation free. So this ends the fifth topic. Let's move to the next topic, which is India-Russia relations. So let's start why this was in news, because Vladimir Putin visited India recently. So let's start with the background of India and Russia relations. So after India became independent, we became non-aligned. We neither became the part of communist bloc, nor did we became the part of capitalist bloc. So we were neutral, and Stalin, therefore, he did not trust India that much because he believed that somehow India is more of a pro-British and a pro-American country. But after the death of Stalin, Khrushchev came to power in Soviet Union, and Khrushchev was very, very pro-Indian. So Khrushchev visited India in 55, Nehru visited in Soviet Union, and the Soviets were, during the 50s and 60s, Soviets played a very important role in building heavy infrastructure in India, in building dams, in building Bhilai steel plant, in helping us establishing DRDO, in helping us establishing the Bhabha Atomic Center. So the Soviets always, helped us because see, India, as you know, under Nehru was more of a leftist country, more of a center left, and and Pakistan became the ally of US. So US was more in support of Pakistan. It always distrusted India. It always looked India with suspicion. Therefore, India had no other option but to have close relations, but to go for close relations with Soviet Union, because ultimately we wanted to build the capital industries, we wanted to build infrastructure, and Soviet Union had the expertise in that. So Soviets played a very important role in creation of modern industries and infrastructure in 60s and 50s. In 62, during the India and China war, Soviet Union remained neutral, even though the other party was also a communist country. And that actually anguished China, because China believed that being a communist country itself, they should have supported India, they should have supported the China, but Soviet Union, because of friendship with India, it remained neutral. In 65 war, it actually sided with India. After the war, Soviet Union was involved in mediation. Therefore, we had this Tashkent summit where the Soviet Union premier Kosygin was a mediator. He tried to sign this Tashkent agreement, which ended the hostility between India and Pakistan. In 71, India signed the Treaty of Peace and Friendship with Soviet Union, and Soviet Union therefore supported India in the 1971 war. More than the physical support, this treaty, it had a psychological impact, because US knew that now India has become ally of Soviet Union. So therefore, if US will interfere in the war, if US will send arms and tanks in the war, Soviet Union will come from the Indian side, and it will lead to a big scale war. Therefore, because this Soviet pressure played an important role in keeping US out of the war, and this is a very important reason why we won the war, because if US would have sided with Pakistan, there would have been no way we would have won the war. In early 80s, we had space cooperation. Rakesh Sharma was sent by the Russian Space Agency. Rajiv Gandhi visited Russia in 80s. In 1991, after the Soviet Union breakdown, India became little less dependent on Soviet Union, or the Russia which emerged out of the Soviet Union. We started looking towards look east policy, and we started looking towards Israel, and we started looking towards US, because in 91 we also had liberalized our economy. So between 91 to 97, when Boris Yeltsin was in power in Russia, India and Russia drifted away. But in 97-98, when Putin came to power, and he was a strong man who had believed in self-confidence, the relations between India and Russia started to improve again. So now let's look at the post-1991 relations with Russia. And before that, let's look at the importance of India for Russia and the importance of Russia for India. So Russia needs India because of three, four reasons. Firstly, because of the sanctions that the West has put on Russia, we have, it is looking towards India and China for the new market because it wants to sell its huge resources that it has. It cannot sell to Europe, it cannot sell to US. Where will it sell? So India is a big market for Russian goods. It is a market, or it is through India it can bypass the US sanctions or the West sanctions. Secondly, uh, Russia needs India because India is also the big market for its defense products. The Russia has so much excess surplus defense equipment with itself, and it is of no use to him. It wants to sell them to different countries of the world, and India is the biggest importer of the defense equipments from Russia. So it needs India for that also. Thirdly, it needs India for the support in UN. If there will be sanctions against Russia by the West, it needs some allies which can take the case of Russia in UN, which is looking for Iran, it is looking for India, it is looking for China. Now let's look at why India wants Russia, why Russia is important for India. So it is important because of five, six reasons. Firstly, energy. Russia has the largest reserve of gas, and we are a gas deficient country. We need Russia for importing cheap hydrocarbon gas and oil from Russia. And our agencies, our companies like ONGC, like GAIL, they have stakes in Russia. They have stakes in Sakhalin fields in Russia. So first important reason why we need Russia is to meeting our energy needs. This also includes nuclear. We need Russia to build civil nuclear reactors for us, which it is doing in Kudankulam. Next is we need India for defense. See, the problem is that US and France and other countries, they don't do transfer of technology. But when we talk of Russia, Russia is now offering us that let us move away from buyer and seller relationship to co-production, joint co-production, joint development and technology transfer. And India needs that for long run. In long run, if we want to achieve the dream of Indianization of defense, we require the help of Russia because Russia gives us technology, and the Russian equipments are the cheapest as compared to US, Japan, or France. So we need Russia to fulfill our defense needs. Third is economy. We need Russia because Russia has a growing middle class, and it is the market for India's pharmaceutical goods, medicines, IT, for India's cotton goods, gems, jewelry. It is a big market. Fourthly, we need Russia for geopolitical reasons. So we have bad relations with Pakistan and China. We need Russia to neutralize that. We also need Russia because Russia has been supporter of India in UN. It is supporting India's case for entry of or getting permanent membership in UN. So Russia is required for that reason also. Also, we need Russia for science and tech and space. Recently it was the news that Russia will help India in sending our manned mission to space. Russia is also a leader in nanotechnology. So we can deal with them in terms of nanotechnology also. Now let's look at the relations between India and Russia in the post-Soviet period. So when we talk of political relations, we should see that India and Russia has signed strategic partnership in 2000. Russia has been supporting India's entry in SCO, in APAC, as permanent member in UNSC. We have also established India-Russia Intergovernmental Commission, and this commission has two areas. One is uh, trade, or one which covers trade, economic, scientific, technological, and cultural cooperation. That is headed by the Ministry of External Affairs. And second is uh, Commission on the Military Technical Cooperation. This is headed by the Minister of Defense of both the countries. Also, Russia is the only country along with Japan where we have annual ministerial dialogue with each other. Now let's look at the military relationship. So in terms of military relationships, if we talk, in 1997, India and Russia signed a 10-year agreement for military and technical cooperation. Russia and India have co-developed BrahMos missile. It is co-developing fifth generation aircraft. India got Sukhoi planes from Russia. We also got Ilyushin from Russia. And most importantly, we have moved away from, as we have told, buyer relationship to co-development and joint development. Third is economic. So when we talk of economic, the trade between both these countries is 10 billion, which is much below the potential. 10 billion is nothing. But it has been improving over the years. So the things which we export to Russia are electronics, medicines, apparels, gems and jewelries, stones, high-end tea, and coffee products. Also, both countries have IRIGC. They have Indo-Russia Forum on Trade and Investment. Then there is India-Russia Business Council. There is India-Russia Trade, Investment and Technology Promotion Council. All those things have moved away from, or all of them are dealing, all of these things are dealing to improve the economic relations between India and Russia. Also, India is talking with Russia for conducting FTA with Eurasian Economic Zone, which includes countries like Armenia, Kazakhstan, etc. Also, both these countries, India has liberalized visa requirement for Russian, and that has increased the tourist flow to India. Also, Russia has been investing, or it has shown its interest in investing in Make in India, smart cities. Russia has also shown interest in developing DMIC, or Delhi Mumbai Industrial Corridor. the two-way investment between both these countries have crossed 30 billion in 2017. And last is energy sector. So in this, the ONGC Videsh has 20% stake in Sakhalin 1. The Russian company Gazprom and GAIL, they are doing joint development of a gas block in Bay of Bengal. Also, Russia is helping in development of Kudankalam nuclear plant in India. Now let us look into the concerns that both these countries have with each other. So when we talk of concerns, in last few years, two things are happening. First is India moving closer to USA and Russia moving closer to Pakistan and China. And both of the countries are not liking that. So India has signed Lamau, we have signed different security pacts with US, and Russia is doing military exercise with Pakistan. It is started to supply arms with Pakistan. It is growing closer. It has signed a trade agreement with China, which India is not liking. Second area of difference between India and Russia is that, which is in Taliban. So Russia wants engagement with Taliban. It wants Taliban to be differentiated into good and bad, and we should have talk with good Taliban. India, on the other hand, believes that Taliban is Taliban. There cannot be a good Taliban or a bad Taliban. We have to strictly deal with Taliban. So these are the two main the differences or concerns that we have in relationship. Now let's look at the contemporary issue where Russia, the Putin has visited India, and he has actually signed a number of agreements with Modi, and they have signed a 5.4 billion deal of S-400 missile. And about S-400, Rakesh would have dealt with it in the earlier lecture, so I will not go into specificities of S-400. I will go on the geopolitical implication of the deal. So by signing the deal, India has completely shown to US that we are not your ally, we are partners, but we are not an ally, and we will continue to deal with other countries of the world also, because there was strict pressure upon India that we should not sign this deal with Russia. But India has shown that we are strategically, we are autonomous. From where we will get the good deal, we will deal with them. We will not bow under your pressure. What are the worries related to the deal? So main worry is that US has warned India that okay, we have allowed waiver in this case, but in future you will have to reduce the defense and military relationship with Russia. You will have to reduce the dealing, because US has now passed an act which is known as CAATSA, which is Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. And CAATSA Act, it punishes those countries which deal with the enemies of US, which include Russia and Iran. And India unfortunately has good relations with both of them. So and USA says that in case to case basis we will deal. We have given them the waiver in this deal, but in future it's not sure whether we will give the waiver or not. So in future, what will happen to India and Russia military relationship, what will happen to India and Iran dealings, that will be a problem. That will be a worrying point. So what is the way forward that we have? Way forward for India is that we need to tell to, because see, not that just India wants US, even US wants India. It's such a big market. The population of India is bigger than Europe. We have 500 people who are middle class in India, bigger than the population of Europe. So US wants India, and we should, we should improve relations with US, but we should not become their pishlagu. We should have our strategic autonomy. We should tell them that we are dealing with you. It does not mean that we will end our friendship with Russia, because Russia and India have an all-weather friendship like Pakistan and China. US, as you know, I mean, it's a fact that US is not a dear or not a saga of anyone. It has always cheated the countries. It only wants to, fulfill its own national interest, and once that fulfills, it is fine. I mean, if you think in that way, Saudi Arabia is the biggest autocratic, dictatorial, conservative society in the world, which violates human rights to a different level. But US has never spoken against human rights violation in Saudi Arabia, and it lectures Iran on that. And even though, because Saudi Arabia is an ally of US, the day Saudi Arabia will start acting against US will say now Saudi Arabia needs a democracy, and they will start intervening in Saudi Arabia to change the regime. So ultimately, we will have to make sure that we should not become an ally of US. We should deal with them, but we should also deal with our natural partners. Let's move to the next issue, which is Human Rights Amendment Bill. Protection of Human Rights Amendment Bill. So recently we have celebrated 25th anniversary of NHRC, and National Human Rights Commission was in news because Cabinet has approved amendment in the original bill. So National Human Rights Commission, these rights commissions are very important for your exam. Every year they are asking at least one question on rights commission. This year they have asked, last year they asked on Women Commission. Every year they are asking one question on that. So therefore the human rights, all these commissions, this topic is very, very important for your mains exam. So let us first deal with the flaws that we have in the functioning of NHRC. Issues. First is that NHRC recommendations or NHRC do not have power to penalize the officials. So it can only recommend if NHRC orders something and the officials refuse to implement them. It has no power to punish them. That is why it is called as toothless commission. Second is, it is not valid in J&K, where the maximum human rights violation takes place. Thirdly, this act has 3 judges. It has 5 members. Out of those, 3 are from judiciary, and the act does not say that these judges should have track record in the field of human rights. It just says that there will be 3 members from the judicial fraternity, and it says that rest 2 will be who have done something great in the human right thing. Now this is very vague. This terminology is very vague. Even a bureaucrat could have done something important in the human right thing. So the definition of composition is vague. Fourthly, the commission cannot investigate a case if the incident has happened 1 year ago. Which means that many cases which has taken place 2 years, 3 years ago, and the candidate or the person, because of some certain circumstances, could not file a case in that period, he cannot file a case now. Next is there is non-filling of vacancies. So many of the members are not appointed, many of the staff is not appointed, and this increases the burden of work on the remaining members, and this ultimately it leads to the delay in passing orders. It leads to what you call as too many complaints, too few people, which leads to delay and lags. Then also, if we talk of armed forces, so in case of armed forces, if there is a case of violation of human right by a person of armed forces, and a person appeals in NHRC, then NHRC will ask the government to send us the report, to inquire and send us the report in that regard. But NHRC cannot summon that officer who has committed this violation. So ultimately, it has no power. It will just tell the government that you send us the report, what has happened in this case, but it has no individual power to actually summon the armed force officer. And this generates a culture of impunity in the armed forces. Next is bureaucratic style of functioning. So NHRC does not have its own original staff. All the members who work in NHRC, they come as a deputation from different wings, and they are like bureaucrats. They have zero knowledge of human rights, they have zero interest about human rights, and that is why the functioning of NHRC is just like bureaucratic office. Therefore, different commissions have suggested that we should go for a separate staff for the NHRC. Now let's look at the proposed amendment under the bill. And before that, let us understand why this bill was actually brought. So in 1993, UN General Assembly adopted what you call as Paris Agreement, and that made it mandatory for each country to have a human right organization or institution. So after that, this National Human Rights Commission was established in India. But recently, what happened was that under the Human Rights Council, there is accreditation. There is an institute which is responsible for accreditation of all the human rights bodies in each of these countries. So last year they refused to do accreditation. So like you have of educational institutions, NAC in India does the accreditation, A+, and all. So the accreditation body of UNHRC, they refuse to do the accreditation of National Human Rights Commission because they believe that NHRC is a toothless body. It has not been doing anything significant it has no powers, therefore we will not accredit them. So in order to ensure that NHRC is according to the principles of Paris Agreement, this amendment is being done in the Human Rights Act of 1993. So let's now look at the proposed amendment. So first is the composition of NHRC. So in the earlier act, only the chairman of NHRC could be only that person who would have been the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court or the Chief Justice of the state or the High Court. But now the chairman of the NHRC could be any judge of the Supreme Court or any judge of the High Court. Next is, in the earlier act, only 2% who had a knowledge about human rights, they could be appointed as the member of NHRC. Now we will have 3% who will have knowledge of human rights could be appointed as a member of NHRC, and out of 3%, one would be woman. Also, earlier, the members of National Commission for SC/ST, National Commission for Women, National Commission for ST, they were de facto or they were ex officio members of NHRC. Now this list of ex officio has been increased to members of National Child Right Protection Organization, the Chief Commissioner of Person with Disability, and the National Commission for the Backward Class. The chairman of these organizations would also be the de facto member of the NHRC. Next is a term of office. So in the earlier case, it was 5 years or 70 years. Which one was earlier? Now it has been reduced to 3 years and 70 years. And the chairman of the National Human Rights Commission are eligible for reappointment. Next is the union territories. So in case of union territories, the center can direct that in this union territory, this state human rights commission will actually work. And in case of Delhi, National Human Rights Commission will, Delhi will be under the jurisdiction of the National Human Rights Commission. So what more can be done, or what are the steps which we can take to improve the functioning of National Human Rights Commission? First thing is that any recommendation of the National Human Rights Commission, it should be accepted by the government instantly, because the problem is that National Human Rights Commission sends some recommendation, then it has to again remind the government that we have sent this recommendation, you should apply that. Again it sends that. So idea is that whenever the government receives the recommendation, it should accept it immediately. Next is, we should have in areas where there is more conflict, like Kashmir, like armed forces which are mostly responsible for human rights violation, they should also be covered under the NHRC, because without that, you are missing out on those people, which actually mostly the human rights violations are done in those areas by those people, and they are not within your ambit. So they should also be within the ambit of NHRC. The NHRC should have power to summon and penalize the officers in those areas who are involved in human rights violation. Third is that most of the non-judicial posts are being filled by these bureaucrats. So we need to include more people from civil society organizations who have a proven track record about functioning of the human rights. Fourthly, we need an independent cadre. The NHRC needs an independent cadre where people, they have their own staff. It conducts its own exams. In that exam, most of the questions are asked on human rights, because see, somebody who has been a bureaucrat, he has no respect for human rights, and these are the people who implements who manages the secretariat. So we need a independent staff for the NHRC. And fifthly, the NHRC should focus more on improving awareness about the human rights in India. It should conduct more workshop. It should conduct more it should focus most of its budget on creating or increasing the awareness about human rights. So this ends this topic of protection of human rights amendment bill. Let's go to the next issue, which is global hunger index. And it was in news because India is ranked 103 out of 117 countries in the global hunger index 2018. And you must have seen a lot of fake news, also a lot of Congress propaganda which says that India's ranking has decreased from 55 to 103. It's not like that, because 2 years back there were just 74 countries which were under the global hunger index measurement. Now there are 117 countries. So yes, we have declined. There is no kind of denying the fact. But we cannot compare 2 years back to now, because 2 years back it was just 74 countries. Now we have 117 countries. So first, let's look at the pre-related facts. Global hunger index is, earlier it was released by IFPRI, but this year it has been released by NGO called as Concern White Worldwide and World Hunger Life. So now IFPRI is no more releases global hunger index. In old books, you will see that GHI would, if you will read that, you will see that GHI is released by IFPRI, but it is a pre-related trivia that now IFPRI is no longer involved in release of global hunger index. Next, we will see is what are the main indicators of GHI, on what basis GHI ranking is released. So when we talk of GHI has three main measurements and four main indicators. So the three main dimensions of hunger are insufficient calorie intake. Second measure is child undernutrition. And third is child mortality. When you talk of insufficient calorie intake, the factor or the indicator which reflects that is undernourishment. When you talk of child undernutrition, the indicators which reflect that is child wasting, which means low weight according to height, and child stunting, which is low height according to age. And when we talk of child mortality, the indicator which reflects child mortality is child mortality, which is number of child dying before the age of 5. So this year's report says that India has improved in undernourishment. We have improved in child stunting, and we have improved in child mortality. So when we talk of undernourishment, the percentage of undernourished people has declined from 18.2% in 2000 to 14% in 2017. When we talk of child stunting, it has significantly reduced from 54% to 38%. When we talk of child mortality, it has decreased from 9.2% to 4.3%. The only indicator in which we fared really bad was child wasting, whose performance has actually increased. So it was 17% in 2000. Now it is 21%. So out of 3 indicators, we did well. In the 4th indicators, we did really bad, and that is why our ranking has declined from 100 last year to 103. And this is surprising, really surprising, because we are the biggest producers of food in the world. The government has launched number of initiatives like midday meal, PDS. We have food security right in India. We have PDS. We have so many other schemes in India, focusing on providing food. Even after that, we are really bad, because it's really bad because we are just above South Sudan, which is a war zone, which is a war prone area. Except South Sudan, we are below Pakistan, we are below Nepal, we are below sub-Saharan Africa, and this is really, it's really bad. It's really surprising. So, what are the reasons why we are at such a bad ranking? See, the problem lies in lack of conversion of calorie intake into energy. See, when we talk of calorie intake, and the indicator which reflects that is undernourishment, we have improved. But a child who is eating food, that food is not being converted into energy. You see, food is the middle way. Food does not keeps you healthy. When you have food, then the food which you have, finally it enters your body and converts into energy, and that's why you remain healthy. But because of other problems like diarrhea, like other kind of diseases, the food you are consuming is not being converted into energy. That is why you are having this secondary problem of wasting and stunting. In India, this is because of lack of sanitation facilities. A lack of sanitation facility is leading to diarrhea, and diarrhea is leading to lack of conversion of food into energy. Next is the flawed food distribution system. So 51% of food is actually wasted, though we are the highest producer, but it does not reaches to the people who actually require it. Next is, or the other causes are poverty. Next is non-exclusive breastfeeding. See, breastfeeding or breast milk provides you with lot of vitamins and all, and it develops the immunity among the child. If the woman does not consume healthy food, the mother does not consume healthy food, there will be less transfer of vitamins to the child, and child requires that to develop immunity. And because of a lack of focus on breastfeeding, the child remains stunted. Next is lack of awareness about nutrition. And issues in food security act. The beneficiaries are not identified clearly. Now let's look at consequences, or let's look at steps, or yeah, let's look at consequences of this low ranking. So see, the main consequence of this lies in the fact that a child who remains weak, he will not be a productive worker in his adulthood. A weak guy is unhealthy, and when he's unhealthy, he cannot do the same kind of work in as productive way as a healthy person can do. People like Stephen Hawkins are an exemption. They are a rare case. Mostly, in a labor force, a guy should be healthy. That is why it's called as health is wealth. So a guy who remains weak, first of all, it creates a vicious cycle. How it creates a vicious cycle? Because a person who will be unhealthy, he will have poor mental growth. And since he will have poor mental growth, he will earn less, he will remain poor. And since he will remain poor, his child that will be born to him, he will also remain poor. It's kind of a vicious cycle. Same, it is more dangerous to the woman than men, because if women would remain malnourished, then most likely the child that will be born to that woman will also be malnourished, right? Her body will not be able to feed, and secondly, it will increase the chance of maternal mortality deaths. So if it actually harms the woman more than it harms the men, because when it harms the woman, it does not just harm her, it also harms her child also, right? Then child's child will remain malnourished. So ultimately, it reduces the overall growth potential of an economy. Have you seen any economy in the world where people are not healthy and they have exceptionally grown, they have exceptionally lifted people out of poverty, or it has become developed? No country has done that. That is what Amartya Sen says. You need a healthy and educated workforce before we can rise. Before that, you can have 8%, 9% growth rate, but the growth rate would always be unequal, like we have in India. So, what should be done? Firstly, we should focus on sanitation, which means that because sanitation will ultimately convert the calorie intake into energy. Second thing is that we need to make children aware and their parents aware about hygienic food, about hygienic practices. Simple practices: when you eat food, you have to wash hand with soap. This can prevent your body from so many bacteria and viruses. Third is we should include millet and pulses in the PDS shops in the or under the food security program, because millet and pulses, the problem in India is that when child is born, in the initial years, when there is maximum growth for potential, when there is maximum potential for growth, we feed them with rice and wheat. Rice and wheat is not protein rich. We should feed them with pulses and millets, and that can only be done if the food security programs covers that. Fourthly, we need to establish food and nutrition commission, which should be headed by the Prime Minister. And lastly, we need to focus on increasing availability of micronutrients in the food which the child eat. Therefore, midday meal, PDS, all of them should give fortified food. So this ends this issue. Now let's look at the another topic, which is, now there are two small topics of mains. Then we'll start with prelims. So estimate panel wants GDP norms changed. So estimate committee of parliament has said that the current measure of GDP which we measure is inadequate, and we should include few other things also in measuring GDP. And these new things include the household work done by women, the depletion of natural resources in 1 year, and the happiness, and whether GDP growth leads to happiness or not. See, ultimately, this has been the criticism of GDP by many social economists, that GDP, I mean, whether GDP growth is taking place because of depletion of natural resources, which ultimately will hurt your long-term economic growth potential, whether GDP is leading to happiness or not. If GDP growth is happening, and it is happening because few Ambanis and Adanis and few 10, 15 people are taking the major share of that growth, and rest of the people are their life is not improving, then that growth is not sustainable, right? You can show that you are growing 8%, but ultimately you're not growing because the life of people is not improving. People are being sad, they are being concerned. If okay, there is GDP growth, but the state has become completely autocratic, it is curbing the rights of people, it is curbing the right to say, right to express anything, it will make people unhappy. So therefore, the estimate panel has said that GDP norm should be changed, and it should include these things also. to measure the GDP. Definitely, it will not be accepted, but it could be a new topic of debate in mains paper 3, that should GDP be replaced by something else. Actually, this happiness thing reminds me of my personal story. In 2013 exam, uh, I missed the final list by 8 marks, and the topic in essay that year was, and in 2013, till 2013 there was only one essay. There were not two essays, there was only one essay. In 2014 they started with two essays. So I missed the final list by 8 marks. The overall cutoff was 775 overall, including interview, and I scored 767 in that year. And essay topic, the topic was gross domestic happiness versus gross domestic GDP versus GDH. And during my masters, I had actually written a research paper on GDP versus GDH debate. So when I saw the topic, I became really kind of, out of this world, that I will, 140 is the minimum I will score in this, because I know everything. All these people know kind of nothing about that topic. And I wrote a very good, according to me, I wrote a very good essay. I wrote really good points. I quoted these economies, these theories. And when the result came, I scored 72 marks in essay paper. And it's like the worst I've ever scored in doing my preparation. It is like, even the average marks are 110, 150. 72 is like across, I mean, probably one of the lowest marks that year. And then and because of that, I missed by 7-8 marks. Otherwise, I would have got into probably IAS, not just the light service, into IAS, if I got just even at the average marks. So the idea which I'm saying is that in essay paper, you have to write like a journalist. You don't have to write like an expert. And from that year, I never wrote an essay on any economics topic. I became so scared that probably I will overdo myself while writing. So you should write general points. You should be more generalist in your opinion during the essay paper. Let's move to the next issue, which is the last mains issue, which is government panel to probe e-commerce firms' big discounts. So this, as you know, I've discussed in the last lecture also that government has it has appointed a panel to review the Competition Commission of India Act, and that panel has been given responsibility to review or to probe because as you know, you have seen now, at least all of us, including me, are buyers from e-commerce. We look for the offer which we get on Amazon and Flipkarts, and this is also, they give so much discounts. Ultimately, the brick and mortar or the conventional retailers, they feel that they are being discriminated. They cannot match the deep discount which these e-commerce firm gives, and this actually is an example of predatory pricing, because ultimately what these e-commerce firms want is that we should be out of the service, we should be out of the market, and once we will be out of the market, these e-commerce firm will then increase the prices. So it's an example of predatory pricing. What do we mean by predatory pricing? Predatory pricing is keeping the price of a good at such a low level to eliminate competition, and once competition is eliminated, increase the price. While the e-commerce firms are saying, see, and why are they actually offering these deep discount? Because in 2016, government allowed FDI in e-commerce, 100% FDI through automatic route in e-commerce marketplace. Now, these e-commerce firms, because of FDI, they have deep pockets, and because of deep pockets, they are able to give these big discounts. The retailers, the conventional retailers on the other end, they do not have the access to FDI, right? Because ultimately these e-commerce firms says that, see, we are not offering the discount, we are just a marketplace. It is the seller who are selling in our platform, they are giving the deep discount. So this panel will look into this, that whether it is creating the problem or whether it is a violation of competition principle or not. So this ends the mains issues of the week. Now we will be discussing the prelims issues. First is sovereign gold bond scheme. So government has relaunched the sovereign gold bond scheme. Let's understand, because this is more important for prelims, the details, and so this you have to tell. So it is being issued by RBI. The minimum amount of bond which you can take is 4 kg. And who are eligible in that? Individuals, Hindu undivided families, trusts, and charitable institutions. What is the interest rate to be offered? 2.5%. Will it be taxable? Yes, it will be taxable, but the capital gains tax will not be introduced or would not be implied on that. Also, this bond can be kept as a collateral to take loan. And what will be the time period? Time period would be 8 years with exit option from 5th year. Why government is bringing this scheme? Because it wants to reduce the import of gold. And for that, it is giving option to the investors that you will get the advantages of gold as an investment, but you will not have to buy the physical gold. Let's move to the next issue, which is Section 150A of the RPA, or Representation of People's Act. So this was in news because recently the government has or the election commission has said that there will be bypolls for Karnataka. No, I mean for the Lok Sabha seats which have been vacant, but there would be no bypoll for the Andhra Pradesh. So in Karnataka, both Congress and BJP are concerned that why, I mean, MP would be an MP for just 6 months. Why to waste money for that? And they are saying, they have kind of complained in the court that like Andhra Pradesh, we should also or the bypolls in Karnataka should also be not there. But EC is saying that we are doing everything according to the section 151 of the RPA. Section 151 of the RPA says that if a seat is vacant in any state, and if the vacancy, if the term of Lok Sabha, more than 1 year term of Lok Sabha is remaining, then there would be by elections, right? So election commission is saying that in Karnataka, the seats became vacant in May, on 1st May, and on 1st May, more than 1 year of Lok Sabha was left, right? But in case of Andhra Pradesh, the seats became vacant in October, so only 7 months were left. So therefore, according to this section, it says that from the day of resignation, if more than 1 year is left in the Lok Sabha, then there will be by-election in that constituency. If it's less than 1 year, then there will be no by-election, as in the case of Andhra Pradesh. Let's move to the next issue, which is MedWatch. MedWatch is a app which is launched by Indian Air Force, and it will give you information. It will provide you information, or it will provide you correct scientific and authentic information, and the information would include timely medical review, vaccination, utility tools like health record card, BMI calculator, helpline number, etc. Next is India for Humanity initiative. The trivia about this initiative is that it is launched by Ministry of External Affairs, and it will open camps. It will open artificial limb fitment camps in various parts of the world. So idea or the objective of this program is to improve the condition of disabled population mostly in African and Asian countries, and to increase the soft power of India in these countries. So there will be camps, there will be regular camps to be organized in these companies, and in these camps there would be artificial limb fitments which will be fitted in the body of disabled people. Next is center merges skill development bodies. So center has merged the National Skill Development Agency, the National Council of Vocational Training, and after merging it has created a new body which is called as NCVET, which is National Council for Vocational Education and Training. So the job of NCVT was to act as a regulator for the ITIs in India. So NCVT was established in 1956, and it used to decide the curriculum of these ITIs, and it used to also recognize these ITIs. The job of NSDA was to implement the National Skill Qualification Framework. And this framework was basically, it was to give, it was just like what you call as egg mark or GI, or what you call ISO certified. It was the same thing of skill development sector, where a person used to get certificate from the skill development, from the skill qualification framework, that this person is skilled, this person has reached this level of skill A, B, C, D, and based on that certificate, that individual could find a job in the outside world. So NSDA used to operate this. Now the problem was that there was a coordination problem between different institutions of which used to regulate skill development. So therefore, to improve coordination, government has merged the NSDA with the NCVT. Next is online assurance monitoring scheme. So this online assurance monitoring scheme has been developed by the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs. See, in the floor of house, when minister used to respond, he used to respond by saying that we assure you that this will happen, we assure you that that will happen. So job of online assurance monitoring scheme would be that whatever assurance the minister gives on the floor of the house, Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs will digitize that and will send that, and it will be uploaded online, that these are the assurances that have been given by that ministry, and then the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs will send that to the concerned ministry and say that you have given these many assurances, out of them these are fulfilled, these are not still fulfilled, so please work on that. Everything will be done online, right? So idea is to improve the implementation of the assurance given by the minister on the floor of the house. Next is India wins election to UN Human Rights Council. So I have already discussed in the previous lecture about UN Human Rights Council. It was created in 2006, and it is the principal UN body dealing with human rights. It has 47 members, and on the basis of equitable geographical distribution, uh, council seats are allocated to the 5 regional groups, and these 5 regional groups are Asia Pacific, East European, Latin American, West European, and other states. So India entered from the Asia Pacific category. Let's move to the last issue of the day, which is Human Capital Index. So Human Capital Index is released by World Bank, and it is part of the World Development Report 2018. 2018. And let us first understand the methodology of Human Capital Index. Human Capital Index has 3 components, and these include survival, expected years of quality adjusted school, And lastly, health environment. And what are the three indicators, or what are the indicators of these three broad measures? So survival is measured by under 5 mortality rate. Expected years is measured by combination of quality and quantity of education received. And last one is measured by adult survival rates and rate of stunting in child below 5 years. So these are the key observations which have been made about India in the report. Firstly, about the human capital index. So it says that a child who is born in India will only be 44% as productive when she grows up as she could be if she would have enjoyed complete education and full health. So a child is 44% productive to its potential. Next is the probability of survival to age 5 is 96. Also, a child who starts school at at the age of 4 can expect to complete 10.2 years of schooling by his 18. But when you also include the quality of education he actually receives, or the actual learning he has received in school, then this number decreases to 5.8 years, which means that even though more and more children are going to school, but the learning outcomes are not improving in India. Next is adult survival rate. It is 83%. Next is healthy growth. So 62 out of 100 children in India are not stunted. So it brings out a very dismal picture about India, and government has refused to accept the report because it says it is not very much happy with the kind of methodologies used in the index. So this ends the lecture for this week. We will be meeting you next week. Thank you.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civil State.